All right, we got to get to the gem with David Griscom.
You had to talk about something that's very much a bold proposal instead of a kind of cowardly return to normalcy. Over the break, this Green New Deal that I like it, that Bernie dropped is just so incredible. And I know everybody has had the opportunity to read through it. If you haven't, you really should. But I really just wanted to highlight a couple things, and especially the most important proposal about it, because this is about so much more than just providing a little bit more renewable energy. I mean, this is about an actual fundamental shift in the United States and the global economy. If you think that climate change is driven by a system, climate change is driven by a system, not just individuals' bad personal behavior. We can't stop climate change without challenging that system indefinitely. That's why Bernie Sanders' plan is so important. Not only is it bolder, going to 100% renewable energy by 2030 instead of 2050, taking on the ideas of the New Deal, absolutely redefining the United States electrical grid. And let's also remember, an important proposal in this plan is to actually move us away from private control of our electrical grid into democratic control of our electrical grid. And they would be doing that by providing the electricity and then encouraging
Can we just say really quick, I don't get into these arguments because they're very often very stupid. But this is a great example. When I've seen some people do a amazing two-step where they go, well, because Bernie isn't like a quote unquote actual socialist anyways, I'm going to support Warren. So they want to do the fake brand of socialist radicalism, which they don't implement in practice. It's just fantasy politics. This is a perfect look. If your standard is, does Bernie want a Maoist insurgency? Okay, I got a comedy routine for you. But this is a very clear example of like, that is socialism. That is democratic socialism. That is not even social democracy. To put the power grid in democratic hands and also talk about criminal penalties for the fossil fuel industry, that is an act of 21st century socialism. I just wanted to underline that.
No,
anyways,
absolutely. I mean, that's the whole point of this segment, is really to hit on how radical this plan is. Not only is he going to be coming after the bad actors, the people who created this crisis in the first place by litigating fossil fuel executives, he also has a very just transition plan for the many people who do work in the fossil fuel industry, the actual workers, the people whose labor, creates and extracts the oil that has, powered the United States for a very long time. And yes, it's created a lot of climate destruction, but these are people who are doing real important jobs. And he's not going to allow these people to be used as pawns by climate executives. He's going to say, look, we're going to give you a very just and easy transition into this new green economy, but we're going to come after your bosses. And that's a pretty fair deal. But the most important thing, and also just another thing too, is like 7.4 million affordable homes. That's something that a lot of people have not been talking about, but there's a real commitment within this Green New Deal. Remember, this is within the Green New Deal proposal to radically expand affordable housing. But the most important and radical thing in this plan is this jobs guarantee. Because what that does is it takes away the power that capitalists have over the majority of the workers in the United States, which is the fear of losing their job, and it takes away the power of the capitalists, what they already have, which is pitting working class people against each other for scarcer and scarcer jobs, and more importantly, for scarcer and scarcer positions that provide any modicum of a livable wage or benefits. So these 20 million Green New Deal jobs are massive, and it's a huge experiment and a proposal, a jobs guarantee, that we could use to radically transition not just away from fossil fuels, but capitalism in itself. It ends the discipline that the ruling class is able to impose on workers. It stops workers from competing with themselves. And also, this is the really radical opportunity here. It allows us to harness democratically the productive capacities of the United States. So we're saying here, if we elect Bernie Sanders and we have this movement behind him, that we want to move away from destroying the planet. We want to move away from enriching the few at the expense of the world as we know it. And we want to radically reform the United States. And also, another important part of the Bernie Sanders platform is also a commitment to working to create renewables across the globe, recognizing that the United States has driven the climate crisis and has an outsized responsibility to fixing it. But taking under democratic control this incredible productive capacity that we have in here to enact what we want, rather than leaving it to what it is now, which is the anarchic whim of the capitalist class and those with money and those with power. We're going to say we're going to democratize not only the economy, but also what we're doing and where we want to go as a society. And if we're able to implement a jobs guarantee in the Green New Deal, it's also something that we can very much implement on a national level as a permanent function of the U.S. economy, so that we can provide all these services that currently are unavailable for people. I mean, just thinking about things like childcare, free childcare for all people. You end one of the most exploitative aspects of the patriarchy, where you have women who are held down by the burden of having to raise children or pay outlandish expenses in childcare costs. I mean, this is an absolutely radical proposal. And just lastly, you also have to understand that across the country, we're seeing water crisis. We're seeing people who are on the front lines, and these are predominantly poor and marginalized communities. And they are marginalized because Republicans and also many times Democrats pass things like balanced budget amendments that prevent things like taking care of the water system, prevent things like even just having the agricultural or ecological standards that we have already put into law from being enforced. In South Carolina right now, there's already many issues with being able to staff, people who are supposed to be doing the inspections for the upcoming peanut harvest. And that's because there's just not enough money, because Republicans have stripped these budgets. We're able to use the Green New Deal to be able to enforce the laws that are already on the books and then expand on them to create a much more ecological and better society, and have local communities working for themselves and providing the services that they need to, especially helping out the people at the very bottom of society who are oftentimes abused. This is absolutely one of the most radical proposals that I've seen in my lifetime, and you really should be going out there and doing everything you can, not only to support Bernie Sanders, but also to support these ideas, because these are the kind of battlegrounds that we need to be fighting, and the transformative vision that's going to lead us to victory.
And just really quick, two other things. Agreeing to 1992 Protocol on Indigenous Peoples' Rights and Sovereignty, and implementing protocols on environmental justice specifically as well, which also they've drawn from grassroots actions and communities. This is the most holistic, radical, transformative, and redistributive policy anybody's put forward in modern politics, who is in the realm of winning.
It reminds me of this book, one of my favorites, written in 1935 by this guy named Frederick Lewis Allen, who was sort of a newspaper journalist, but wrote a lot about the sort of economic changes. He wrote one book about the 20s, another about the 30s, but also this one, which is available on Audible, called The Lords of Creation. And then I think the added subtitle is The History of America's 1%. But I'll just read from the description here. The Rockefellers, Fords, Morgans, and Vanderbilts were the lords of creation who, along with like-minded magnates, controlled the economic destiny of the country unrestrained by regulations or moral imperatives. Through a combination of foresight, ingenuity, ruthlessness, and greed, America's of industry remolded the U.S. economy in their own language. They established their power and authority, ensuring that they and they alone would control the means of production, transportation, energy, and commerce, creating the conditions for the stock market collapse of 1929 and the Great Depression that followed. And it's a very trippy book to read, and I recommend people do it, because it's at this time where it's like, oh, well, at least we've moved on from that stage of history, and we're right back in it. But I love the framing of the lords of creation as the way these people think of themselves.
Absolutely. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.